Thank you for being with us today. My name is Victoria Carrasco. I am Adjunct Curator at the PHI Foundation for Contemporary Art. First of all, I just want to thank Marie Joly, who invited us to Papier this year. Marie is the head of programming at Papier, so thank you for your trust. Thank you for your invitation. I am so very happy and lucky to share time and space with Fiona, Anis, Véronique, Laperrière, and Joliz Dela Peña. The title of our talk today is Making Contradictions Visible, Artistic Practices in the Public Sphere. So we're going to discuss about 3 different projects. We're going to talk about L'étreinte des temps and Ad Astra by the Society of Affective Archives, who is composed by Fiona Anis and Véronique Laperrière M. And we're also going to discuss about Nilalang, a performance that happened part of Artch 2021 with Joliz Dela Peña. So the main theme of the talk today, just to remember, I think what we want to talk about is about the active act of forgetting. Public art is at the peak of its visibility when it's inaugurated. As time passes, is it up to the viewer to interpret the work, often without context or mediation? This opacity becomes a condition that is reappropriated by artists working within the public sphere in projects that are markedly performative, ephemeral, or furtive, or that aim to leave no material or spatial trace. How are invisible practices remembered within the context of public art? So that is our main question here. For this conversation, it's important to address the different processes and practices that we're going to talk about today, to underline how these interventions take place and evolve in the public art landscape in this place where we live in and context, and how we can value them also. The presentation is in English, but of course if you have questions in French, we're all fully bilingual, so we can definitely help, and I can translate also. So we're going to start with our presentation. We're going to start with a few examples that are key to this conversation today. Projects that have contributed to public art in Montreal, and also public art that are efforts mostly to change things in the future. So I'm going to start with this image that is an image of the remains of the International Sculpture Symposium that happened in 1964. It was the biggest, if I can say, or the first effort of symposium in North America in terms of sculpture. Of course, in Europe, it was more common. The goal of the symposium was to be iterative, so the second edition happened in Toronto, but it lost its rhythm afterwards. So you can find the remains on the Mont Royal today. The symposium was composed of 12 artists that were invited to work in situ on the Mont Royal, and only one of the sculptures was a woman. So her name was Shirley Witebski. So, I need 2 hands here. Next. I also just wanted to go back to this project that happened in 2017. That was part of a public art project by the City of Montreal called Promenade Fleuve Montagne. I just wanted to go through this project because, to my knowledge, it's one of the first public art exhibitions involving women and Indigenous artists. It was curated by Cheryl Sim, who is managing director and curator at the PHI Foundation. It was called Sentier de Résilience, and it was in 2017. So this is an image of one of the artworks by Maria Hopfield named Kapau. Then a second one by Nadia Mir called Histoire Revenue. And then a third one by Skawe Nadi, The Celestial Tree. A third project that I just want to shed light on is by the CCA, the Center for Canadian Architecture in Montreal, who worked recently on a charrette That was a special edition, so Charrette after McDonald, that was in 2021. I thought it would be also interesting to add it to the presentation because of the projects we're going to talk about. I really considered this charrette as an effort to rethink the future. So the charrette was made for proposals to take place and to change perhaps in some future the place of the monument and rethink the monument and also maybe rethink La Place du Canada. Just one moment, I forgot to mention. Rethink the monument of John A. Macdonald that takes place in Place du Canada. Okay, so I think now, if we're ready, we're going to jump to discuss about who are the Society of Affective Archives and what is your mission, and then also to present Les Trains des Temps.
I'll start by saying an enormous thanks to Victoria for bringing us together today. It's with a lot of joy and also a couple of butterflies that I introduce the Society of Affective Archives. The Society was founded in 2010 by Véronique Laperrière and myself, Fiona. And we started the Society as we were seeking to create a platform for interdisciplinary dialogue, for intercultural exchange, and for experimentation in the realm of research creation. And I start with one image from one of our very earliest projects. And this project took place as a series of micro performances across Death Valley. Death Valley is a national park in the southern United States that's well known for its natural phenomena. I point to this image because I think it speaks to something we try and cultivate in our practice, and that is the cultivation of various forms of deep listening, combined with trying to seek tools or strategies to help detect or listen to the pulse or the rhythm of particular places or times. So that's, in a sense, one of the things we try and do within our collaboration. The next image, that's me. The next image also dates back to one of our earliest projects. And this was a project called RE, In Search of Horizons. And we paired the reading of a selection of texts in various sites across Montreal. So we read texts and combined them with, for example, natural history museums or subway stations or parks. And that eventually developed into our first artist book and a public performance. I'm here today, however, to focus on one project in particular. And that's our first public art project. So in 2015, we saw an open call by the Bureau d'Art Public, the City of Montreal. And we were very curious, animated about the site of the work to come. So we decided to create a proposal. And one of the first things we did was contact Nadia Mir. Nadia Mir is an artist living and working in Montreal. Probably many of you are familiar with her work. She has a really profound, prolific, poetic, engaged practice. I met Nadia about 20 years ago when I first arrived in Montreal and did an apprenticeship with her. And so we approached Nadia and asked if she would consider being a mentor and a collaborator for this project. So the project started with three voices, myself, an Anglophone, Véronique, Francophone, and Nadia, who's an Indigenous artist. And together we developed a concept for this site. And I guess I'd like to speak a little bit more about the site because it really guided our ideas for the project. The sculpture is located on the Mont Royal, which is a large park in the center of the city. But more specifically, the sculpture is located on the northern summit of the park. And this section of the park has been named or renamed Jojage Ichiragwene. And this name was developed in consultation with members of the Kanawake community. And Jojage, maybe some of you are familiar with, it's one of the earliest names for this island that we now often call Montreal, and Ochiragwene, which could be described as a meeting place. So we wanted to give a voice or acknowledge the history of this park, of this place, which has, since time immemorial, been a meeting place for First Nations people. And it's also historically cited as one of the first points of contact between First Nations people and new arrivals or settlers. And we wanted to acknowledge this history as well as imagine a future. So we decided to work with a specific material, and that is willow. Willow has been known as an ancient remedy against pain, so used by cultures around the world as well as locally here in Quebec as a remedy against pain. And we thought that working with this material could be a way to both give voice to the past and imagine the future. This is a detail of the sculpture, and I guess here maybe it's possible to start seeing the detail of the work. The way we worked was with traditional weaving techniques, vannerie, so techniques that would usually be used small scale, for example, to create baskets. But in this case, we were working on an exponentially large scale. And in the next image, you can again see kind of the process of transformation. On the left is a detail of the woven willow, and on the right is its transformation into bronze. So we worked with a technique called the lost wax technique, or modèle perdu, to make a direct translation of the willow, the original willow sculpture, into bronze. This is an image of the process of creating the work. So to create the work, we moved to Inverness, which is a small town in center Quebec, to work in close proximity and partnership with l'Atelier de Bronze d'Inverness. That was the foundry we were working with to realize the work. And the foundry gave us access to a barn. And that's where we started to weave these massive stems of willow. This is during the process of creating this work, which was a very fait à main kind of crafted work. We created a series of photographs that are, in a sense, performances of us making particular decisions about the creation of the work. So in this image, we are deciding the diameter of the internal structure of the sculpture. We wanted to create a form that you could walk inside of, that would hold you. And that is, I guess, gives light to the name of the sculpture. The sculpture is called L'étreinte des temps. And l'étreinte is a way to describe like a very tender embrace. So we were curious to work with that title to describe both the physical shape of the sculpture. It evokes the form of a weeping willow, and you can really walk inside of it and enter it. L'étreinte is also gives voice to the process of making. We're really weaving willow together. And it also gives voice to, again, that temporality we were trying to address, of addressing both the past and the future. So this is one of the performances, and also gives light to, in parallel to the creation of the sculpture, we also worked in collaboration, in partnership with Maxime Pelletier-Huot to realize a video documentary. We wanted to find a space or a strategy or a way to give voice to the ideas at the heart of the project, as well as its process of creation. So this documentary became a way for us to do that. It was first presented at the FIFA, the Festival International des Films, sur l'art. And fortunately, the Foundation PHI entered into collaboration with the FIFA, and for the next 2 days, for the duration of Papier, the film is available to view on the FIFA's online platform. This is an image taken from the inauguration of the sculpture. During the inauguration, the ceremony was opened by a member of the Kanawake community. And again, giving voice to the ideas. I think at the heart of this project are ideas, or finding spaces and means and methods to create bridges between different communities, and to begin opening conversations on what is reconciliation. This is an image that gives an idea of the location of the sculpture. The sculpture is somewhat hidden or somewhat secretive, as it's located in a clairière, or a clearing. And so it almost requires a bit of a pilgrimage to arrive there, but I'm happy to share information of its location. And maybe now I'll pass the parole to Véronique.
Thank you. Maybe to add a comment on Les Treintes. While we were doing the research about the mountain, it came to our attention how the mountain is in fact a sacred land, and some very ancient burial have been discovered there, and they are dating from before the arrival of the settler. So, and this is a tradition that still continues today, as there are 2 cemeteries on the mountain. So, considering this sacred aspect of the land, we wanted to do something that would integrate respectfully in the landscape, and also something that would blend in harmony with the tree and the forest. So the sculpture has this chameleon feeling to it, as you can see here in winter. It blends with the landscape. And we also wanted to create a sculpture that could call for some ritual or ceremony gathering. And this is an anecdote, but we find it interesting. From time to time, we visit the site and we find trace of events that happen there, like a small fire or sculpture made of branch. And it's not that we invite people to do that, but we are happy to see that the work somehow calls for those kind of events. And now I would like to share another work that we did. It's a different work, but it still have affinity with Les Treintes, as it's also relate about connection, healing, and empathy. So it's an interior project that end up also being more internal, especially that we did a collaboration with the field of neuroscience. So the work is called Ad Astra. It's a multimedia public art work realized for the medical library at the University of Montreal Health Center in Montreal, also called Le CHUM. So I will present you this project more in detail, and I will try to give light on the variety of processes that constitute and create the work. So in final, we can say that somehow the work, the physical work, is the archive of all the process we did to realizing it. And so to start, I will share this. So this is the question that guided us throughout the work. And as you can see, the work is about sending messages to the stars. So we have this idea for a while that we wanted to send messages to the stars. And when the context of the hospital, the project of the hospital arrived, we thought this was an interesting space to explore this question. So we ask ourselves, okay, but why send messages to the stars? And so we answer back to ourselves, because they are ancient, because they persist, because we are made of the same matter, because they are our ancestor, they are our origin and our future. So we were animated by this idea of sending messages to the stars, but we thought we will do it on a metaphorical and poetical level because it's easier. And especially, we're interested by the stars and the night sky, especially that in our initial research, we're interested by the affinities between the imagery of astronomy and also of neuroscience. So how the infinite small and infinite big like deeply relate. And so I'm sharing here an image from the studio. So as I was saying, it's a really process-based work, and as we worked, we will often do some kind of private performance that we will share by doing documentation of it, photographic documentation. So here, this is us in the studio, kind of performing, but also really working on the project. So here you can see the full project. So you see the 3-wall installation. So the walls are incorporating photography in light box. There's 2 video on screen, and there's a fiber optic system that creates about 60 luminous dots. And there's also an alcove in one of the walls with a publication. So the walls are, just to give you an idea, they're between 14 and 25 feet wide. So the photo you see in the light box, they are a portrait of a participant to the project. So at the beginning of the work, we created a call in the hospital inviting the community to participate, and we really did the call at large. So all the people you can imagine working in a hospital, so the patient, relative, health professional, the doctor, nurse, even the researcher. So we invite them to send us message that they would like to send to the stars. And in the call, we explained that we will do this sending on a metaphorical level, and that we will also send them by means of a transformation into image and video. So we will transform the message into an image. So here in the middle of the image, you can see an example of the video. So the video presents really slow moving cosmic images. And in fact, the images are the result of the message transformed into visual representation. So the portrait of the participant are in the same spirit. So the image each participant is holding is message that has been transformed. And I will explain you how we did this transformation. But before, I wanted to share an example of message that we received. and that we included in the project. So I will read it with you. So it was a message coming from a patient partner and volunteer at the CHUM Hospital. So his message goes like this. I live, I die, so strong and so fragile. Who wants to hold my hand? Haiku in honor of a 57 years old HIV positive man who donated his organ and tissue upon his death. On January 4, 2016, his gesture made possible the first North American kidney transplant from a deceased HIV-positive donor to an HIV-positive recipient at the CHUM Hospital, of which I am the beneficiary. So as you can see, the message just gave voice to those extraordinary hidden stories in the hospital. So to go back on the transformation process. So for the transformation of message into visual, we collaborate with a neuroscience lab that is affiliated with the CHUM. So it's the Tech Tree Lab from Université de Montréal. And with their team, we created a custom scientific experiment, so a special project where we transform the message into images. So for that, we used the EEG. So it's a technique in neuroscience that reads the electrical signal from the brain. So we mandated a messenger. So here she is. So to use her brain to translate the message into data and images. So here it's the kind of imagery and data that we got from this process. So at the top, what you can see is called a topographical map. So it's a mapping of the area of the brain that are solicited during the hearing of the message. And at the bottom, it's another diagram called butterfly plot. And this is a condensed visual representation of the experience of one message that is going through the brain of the messengers. So those were the data we used to translate each message. And here a close-up of one of the participants. So this participant actually is the person that I just read the message. So that's him holding his message to the stars. And here other example of a participant with their message. And so it's a really like a layered work that can be approached on a different level. It's a piece you can spend more or less time with. And the process behind it stay invisible unless you dig more into it. And we really welcome this with the publication. So the book really assembled all the archive of the project. And there's also a text by an invited author. And there's several copies of the book that circulate freely in the library. And the book is really meant to show our process from early conception, gathering of idea, the participant aspect, and all the neuroscience collaboration. And of course, the book presents all the message and their visual representation. So there will be a lot more to say on this project, but maybe Fiona, you want to add something?
Maybe I'll just add a bit of insight into the title of the project. So the project Ad Astra, and Ad Astra is a Latin expression that is translated to the stars. And we thought working within a medical library, working with a Latin word was found an affinity with the space, but we also wanted to invite an open space to pose possibly unanswerable questions. We were in a hospital context, we're sometimes in face of challenging situations. And we appreciated being situated within a library context, because a library is often a place where you go in search of answers. And I guess we were curious to insert an archive into that library that held a series of questions or messages to send to the stars.
Thank you. Thank you so much for presenting your pieces. And we have so many questions that we will we will move to questions at some point. So thank you so much. So now it's Joliz is going to talk about Nilalang.
It's my turn. Thank you for the enlightening talk with your projects. It's very resonating. So hi, I'm Joliz Dela Peña, and I'm an interdisciplinary artist based in Jogjague, also known as Montreal. And a lot of my works, mostly performances now, talks about me expressing the invisible discomforts as a marginalized woman of color, an immigrant, and a child of diaspora. Before I start, I just want to have a trigger warning. There's mention of blood and also in the visuals of this project. So Nilalang in English is called Beings, and I presented this in the 4th edition of Artch last year. Too close. My microphone? Okay. And basically, the conceptualization of this project started with me closer. Okay. Yeah, so I was contemplating about migration, immigration, and my territorial belongingness in this land. I was also thinking of raw materials like water and soil, and beside no, too nervous. With the skeletal structure of the sculpture being metal, I was really interested with the deterioration of the material over time. So this performance is process-based. For 8 days, I think, I was building the sculpture with people and myself. And I don't really like using the word performing because I started having an intimate relationship with the sculptures when I was working with it alone, with the mud and texture, and water and everything all around me. I was just pushing them all aside because I just the questions and contemplation was happening in there. And I remember I had after the first the opening night of Artch, I was interviewed, and they were asking me what was on your mind during the making, the process of the sculpture. And I was just saying, my mind was blank. I can just feel the texture and the coldness of the mud, and I feel like my ancestors are reaching to me, and I don't know, the spiritual guidance of all of this is coming. And after the rest of the days, I was just focused on building it. And I don't know, maybe a lot of people wouldn't get what I was feeling, but it was very, very prominent during those times. Also got commentaries that this material, the mud, is not really, I don't know, I could just say it's people commented it's disgusting, but it's literally where we're stepping on. It's it's our shelter. And there's a lot of symbolism, not just in my country, but everywhere, parts of the world. It's, you know, it's healing. So throughout the 2 weeks I was building it, I was with the community, like people were helping me build it, and there were conversations that sprung up, and it becomes this healing like gesture. I wasn't performing anymore, I was performing for myself. So this is the finale of this performance. I want to mention that I'm blanking. Dorchester Square have this monument of Sir Wilfrid Laurier, which is across the John A. Macdonald statue, which was toppled down during the Black Lives Matter protest. And I took the opportunity during Artch to kind of educate people that this is also a colonizer statue that is still standing there high. And my purpose with Nilalang is to give life and also take away the life of the sculpture. So there's a video that we couldn't show where I was doing this sort of ceremony, which is very inspired by the indigenous people in the Philippines called ifugao, where they basically carve wood and dip it in pig's blood to give life to a sculpture, and it's to honor the ancestor and the spirits. And with this thing, I have a co-performance that covered the sculptures in blood. And during the performance, I wasn't planning to topple them down and put my weight on the sculptures, but it just felt very natural for me to kill the sculptures. So it was toppled over, and I felt like I should climb the statue to like redirect people that this is a colonizer statue that not a lot of people know about. So yeah, that's Nilalang.
So thank you again to share your projects. I know that it can be very personal, and we also work so hard and for a long time on projects like this. As we mentioned at the beginning of the talk, process is very important. I think, Joliz, you mentioned it through Nilalang, a lot of through the length of the performance. Part of it was actually not a performance, it was process, and you know, I feel like people kept labeling it as a performance, and you're like, well, actually, no, I'm really in touch with the sculpture right now. I think I would have two questions in relation to either process, but also sites. So for an example, the site of where Les Trains des Temps is taking place is the Mont-Royal, and I think we all know through research that the Mont-Royal was used by indigenous people at the beginning, and then it was designed and taken by all of us, I guess, for entertaining, doing sports, etc. I think I was curious to know how you composed with the history of a site like Mont-Royal. I think that we know that it's always located closer to a wealthier community. For an example, there's an access quality, let's say, that can become difficult, that with time now everybody has access to parks, and the pandemic really highlighted that. So I'm just wondering, how did you compose with the Mont-Royal, or worked in dialogue with what it means or represents in the city here?
Yes, I think both the really deep history up to the more contemporary history and to the actual context of the park really guided us and inspired us. And we really wanted to create a sculpture and a site that would be welcoming and really for everybody. And the site is this kind of a hidden and sheltered area, but it's also open and quite sunny and really welcoming. And we did the aménagement with big rocks, and we wanted the place to be inviting for many people to just stay there and spend time. And we wanted the space to be an experience, and the sculpture also be an experience. You can touch it, you can enter into it, as Fiona was saying. So, and it's the shape of a tree, so it's quite accessible and everybody can understand it. So it's really about being open and for everybody.
Maybe, Joliz, I was curious in knowing a bit more about Nilalang. How do you see its evolution in time? Because I know our performance doesn't just end there, right? There's always ideas that keep evolving in some way. And I know that, when we talk about performance, there's always this archive idea that, how do you try to find traces in time after the performance, for an example. And so I'm just curious how do you work with your performance in this sense? How does Nilalang keeps evolving actually in time for you?
Yes, so actually after the performance, I was compelled with a lot of emotions and sentiments that it was pushing me to go back to my home country and actually explore all these questionings in there, because I think during and after the festival, I was still thinking this is not right. I should do this where I was born, where I was raised, and touch the soil there and all that. And I want to learn welding and this practice and do it there. I feel like it'll be more fulfilling for me spiritually to have it done it there. Yeah.
Well, I think if we're ready, we can open to the public for questions. We're all...
Yeah. Could you please elaborate a little bit on the choice of the word affective? in the title?
The name of the society, we developed that at the very early phases of our collaboration. And we were curious in our work to both respond to history and create archives that give voice to various types of knowledges or know-hows, savoir-faire. But in communicating the work, we were curious to take some freedom, I guess, in how those archives are formed. So when I think of affective, I think of works that address not just factual, not just pure facts, but also touch into realms of the sensibility and touch upon. It's actually a really interesting question within the context of this talk, and thinking about what are the invisible resonances of places and times, and again trying to find tools and strategies to tap into those sometimes imperceptible or varying perceptibilities, sometimes unwritten histories, and give them voice. And so I guess, I apologize, I'm not being very clear. Maybe Véronique has something to add to be more precise.
But I think the word affective, we joined it with archive, and we've been really like revisiting and reflecting about what is an affective archive. And through time, we realized that, okay, perhaps it's an affective archive would be something that we create that relates to the past, but that helps us to be grounded in the present and to see ourselves in the future. So we see it as a poetic prism to navigate in time, through time.
The reason that I asked, and why I was so curious is I'm not sure if I come from a medical background, and I'm not sure if you're aware that affective is a word that's used in psychology to refer to feeling and emotion. So that was, I thought, that was my I don't know if you're aware of that, or yeah.
Yes, thank you. Yes, as Fiona was saying, we position ourselves more in the realm of the emotional than in the factual.
Hi, I have a question about the willow sculpture in the park. So without any context, it's just a sculpture. And with the presentation you give today, we know that it's much more beyond the sculpture itself. And also the whole process about like making the sculpture from a single idea. I wonder that how you deal with the fact that when people go into the park without knowing all those backgrounds, they only see the sculpture, and how you deal with that a lot of people, if they do not know those backgrounds, they would just perceive it as a sculpture. How you deal with this kind of conflict?
I think, in a sense, we try to tap into strategies to contextualize the work. So the film is one avenue. Maybe I'll let Véronique speak a bit more about those strategies.
Yeah, it's really an ongoing process to always bring the story and share the process behind the work, and like doing talk like today is part of those strategy. Also giving artist talk in the academic context or conference, we're always happy and feel privileged when we can do it like today. We also make sure to keep our website updated with comprehensive archive of the project, and as we were mentioning, we also create independent objects that accompany the project, like the film. And for Les Trains des Temps, we also have an author that we invited to write a text. And this text is about the work and is shared on our website. And there's also a pamphlet that the City of Montreal made, and in it you can read the text. And actually I have a couple here with me today, so if you want some, please come. And there's a map for finding the work. So those are all strategy, and as you can see, we spend a lot of time and energy on creating those objects that can share the process of the work.
Maybe if I could take just 1 second to elaborate also, even without all of that contextualization, I think it's our hope, anyhow, that the methods of creating the work, the choice of materials, so working with willow and working with weaving, that somehow, in a sense, that communicates a celebration of ancient global practices and modes of knowledge and knowing. And I hope that just in itself, it celebrates those kinds of knowledges, and that in an abstract way, a lot of our strategies are communicated directly through the sculpture.
Thank you for your question. I think it's very important and integral to this conversation too. I think that, well, the 3 examples that we saw today, for an example, so Ad Astra, I'm not sure, is it temporary or it's permanently presented? Or like Les Trains des Temps is permanently presented outdoors, and Joli's performance was ephemeral. And I think that, yeah, it's important to try to find ways to see how they can survive actually time. And that's why at the beginning I pointed to the symposium on the mountain in 1964, because today I think we all grew up with those public art pieces in Montreal, either there or anywhere, and there's often a lack of context. So you know them, you know they're there, but you don't know why they're there or what's their stories. But I find very interesting what you said, Fiona, actually, that you kind of trust fully the sculpture in itself, also to just be able to communicate. And I think that's important to remember. So thank you for your question again. So,
Sorry, there's one.
oh, yes, thank you.
If there's time.
Yes, there is.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for your presentations. This message, or this question rather, is for Joliz Dela Peña. I'm very interested to know can you speak more about the site of your performance, and maybe a little more about the relationship of your piece and the site itself?
Okay, this is interesting. I was actually going to mention it, but my mind just blanked out. So, Dorchester Square is actually a burial graveyard site, like way back before they turned it into a park. And it's a graveyard for settlers. And they turned it into a park that holds monuments of important people in the history of Canada. Specifically the Sir Wilfrid Laurier statue. So behind where I'm standing there is the statue, and so I mentioned before that this is inspired by the indigenous ceremony in the Philippines called Bulul, and they placed the statues that they made specifically on what they wanted to be blessed. So for me, I kind of like took that and saw the contradiction where I would put the sculptures there and give it life and also take the life out of it as a metaphor of maybe somehow I can get everybody's attention into this sculpture that's behind me, or not sculpture but a monument. And all people were encouraging me when I climbed the statue, even though I could technically be arrested for vandalizing. But instead I just took one of the masks that I was wearing, which is a funeral mask in the Philippines, and I just put it in the hand of Sir Wilfrid Laurier to symbolize that this person that we still gaze up had killed a lot of people in the past, and nobody's acknowledging that. So, thank you for that question.
Thank you so much. I think it's almost the end. I just wanted to remind two things. So one of the things is that we did share an article of Joliz on our social media. So if you want to know more about Nilalang or just Joliz practices. And then also that Fiona mentioned it already, but the documentary of Les Trains des Temps is online right now and available for a few days for free. So just if you want to know more about the Society of Affective Archives and also about Joliz, we published a few tools on our social media. So thank you so much.